गुड मॉर्निंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। A few days back, General Gautam Moorthy went to China, and when he spent a couple of weeks there and then came back. And today we're going to ask him what his impressions of China were. And hence, at the outset, General Gautam sir, welcome back to India and welcome. You know, it's so nice to talk to you. You spent 2 weeks in China. You went with a whole lot of ideas from here, your own views and concept of China, and probably you come back from there with a completely different set of ideas and thing, or maybe some are reinforced. I wouldn't this say. And also, uh, you're widely traveled. You've been to all parts of the world during service and after service also. Right? You're one of those rare people in India who've been to Pakistan and China. Now, so with this kind of a thing in view, and that's why I thought we'll have this special session, and this is for all viewers. This is going to be an in-depth idea of what China is, right? He went there as a tourist, but I'm sure he'll share his experiences and many of what things which we have spoken of are reinforced, right? And that's what my discussion with him before this, tells me, informs me. But then we should hear it from him. With this, I'd request you, sir. Over to you. You just take off whichever direction you go. I'll pick it up and we'll go from there. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, General Shankar. Good morning to your viewers. Good morning, everybody else. Uh, as General Shankar said, I'd like to correct him a little bit. I didn't go to China as a tourist. I went more as a traveler because a tourist just goes see some places and comes back, but a traveler carries with him or her impressions of the place and tries to observe what he or she can, not only during a guided tour that we were on through a private company, but also traveling on his own within China, within the cities. Essentially, we were a group of about 27. We went through a travel company, and uh, there was trepidation. There was no doubt about it, General Shankar. Whether we'll get the visas, and the founder and MD of CASA, General Shankar, and I have had numerous discussions on China. They've pulled no punches. I've given interviews on China to rediff.com and spoken extensively on China and my impressions of China from India and from what one has read, seen, and known about the country, especially the relationship between India and China, the military issues between us. So I had a bit of trepidation whether I would get a visa or not in the first place. Similarly, there were a couple of other members of my group who have also spoken against China, but to our pleasant surprise, when we applied for a visa, within less than a week, we got it. And we did mention in the visa, and when the visa form came about, it said retired general of the Indian Army. So the Chinese were fully aware of who we were, and gave us the visas. Uh, One way to look at it is they're okay about it. The other way to look at it is they probably wanted us to come and also take a look at how they are, how China is, and what can glean from it. We spent 10 days there, not really 2 weeks, 4 days in Beijing, three in Xi'an, and three in Shanghai. Uh, of course, tourist places like the Great Wall, Tiananmen Square, the Grand Palace, Forbidden City, were all a part of our tour. But then we also had spare time in which some of us just got the metro and went where we wanted to. Went to some interesting streets. One is called Tanjing Fong Street, which is a very lively street. We went to a Silk Street, which is essentially a mall. And malls in China are absolutely world class. And I some of your viewers would have also gone. You see, when you're looking at China, you're also looking at the other Far East neighbors like Thailand and Singapore. And if one has been to the three places, there is one impression that I get: the mall wise, it's all the best that you find in all three places. But there are far greater crowds in Bangkok and I dare say Singapore than I found in China. There were shoppers, I won't say there weren't any shoppers or the malls were empty or anything of the sort, but far less than what the population of China is really. All products available, haggling goes on in some places, haggling does not go on in some places, and we're pretty much free to do what we want. I also saw the Chinese people going about the daily lives. They, they are very well organized. Cities are spick and span, absolutely clean, incredible level of cleanliness. I was afraid I'll be assailed by certain smells and all that, but zero. And when I inquired about the wet markets that started the whole COVID thing, the guide very clearly told us, he says, the moment COVID hit, the wet markets closed on and they haven't opened. There is no wet market that is open in China today, according to the guide. I obviously did not go on ground to check that because I was interested in doing other things. But quietly, silently, without admitting any responsibility or anything, they've just shut down the wet market. So obviously, the virus has emanated from there is a conclusion that I have drawn, and maybe General Shankar too, and the viewers could also probably draw this conclusion that uh, the virus has jumped from animals to humans, where the animal production is controlled under strict conditions. Then such things do not take place because animals uh, are medicated, vaccinated, etc., etc. The people that I came across pretty free. However, they were all smiling, happy, but they were not shouting at the top of their voices. I've seen Chinese tourists elsewhere. They can be a very noisy bunch. Only people who can beat them to it are Indian tourists in a bunch. But in China, very well behaved. The people are very well behaved. They move out in families. The family is a very, very strong unit in China. And you could see typically, a husband and wife with a set of grandparents, or maybe three grandparents or four grandparents, and one child or two children at best, moving around, going to these places. The tourist spots, let me tell you, especially in Beijing, had, to my mind, about 90% local tourists and only 10% foreign tourists. And even in Shanghai, which is the other end, we were about 80% local tourists and 20% foreign tourists. So, insofar as tourism is concerned, there is a demand. If we all live in our cities where in India where there are extraordinary monuments and places, but once you've seen them, you don't repeatedly go there. But I found this to be an interesting Chinese habit. The other thing is that the government has encouraged tourists, local tourists, to wear their traditional dresses. The government is very strong on tradition and culture. And as my friend General Bhatia said, it started and history, when he recalled that when Mao visited Egypt and the Egyptians spoke about the 5,000-year culture. So he came back to China and said, we have a 5,000-year history and culture. He said, we have even older history and culture. So they're not looking at 2,000 years, they're looking at 5,000 years. And the golden age. The thing that they are upset about in history is the period of what we call the Boxer Revolution and the Boxer Wars, when they were forced to import opium by the British, and I guess they swore after that never again. We know that China went through great turmoil. They believed in dynasties, one dynasty of another, dynasties lasting 500 years. That kind of continuity existed in China. The life of the common citizen wasn't disturbed by who was ruling. Of course, there were waves of the people were desperately poor. There's no doubt about it. Subsistence agriculture existed during that time, and great finery that is the hallmark of all monarchies across the world. So you couldn't only hold China responsible for it. The thing about the dynasties is that when it came to an end around 1910, 1914, I think all of you must have, many of you would have seen the film The Last Emperor. If you haven't, locate it online and take a look. It's beautifully made. And as an aside, after that film was made, and it was made inside the palaces of the Forbidden City, nobody has been permitted to enter those palaces because the lighting and everything else that they created there did cause damage. Because, and that in many places, photography is not permitted in buildings because of the flash and everything else that does damage uh, the old paintings on the wall, the fabrics that are on display, etc. And basically, footfalls entering such places. So you don't enter the palaces; you see it from outside. It's not open to visitors. Uh, Talking about that, then China, we all know, went through this great turmoil, and finally the Kuomintang took over, and then Long March and Mao came and took over, and I must share with you, with your readers, as it intrigued me as to why China became communist. And it goes back to at that time in the 1930s, China used to use silver coins for exchange. And the US and everybody else was using gold, the rest of the world. When the US was going through the Great Depression, they wanted to boost the silver industry, so they started importing silver. When they started importing silver in large quantities, the price of silver fell, and then it led to Kuomintang established paper money. And paper money led to hyperinflation, and hyperinflation uh, then created total chaos in China, and therefore Mao and his cohort stepped in. That aside, today China, you can't make out a shred of communism. It is a capitalist state with strong welfare policies. There is so much more I can speak about. What else would you like me to cover, General Shankar?
Yeah. So let's start with a few things which we've always spoken of China, or rather, I have spoken of China. I'd like you
Okay.
to think. You said China as a capitalist state, with strong welfare systems and all that. But the analysis suggests that this, I mean, leave the capitalist state out, and I'll not talk of that. But the welfare system of the society and demography, and the demography of the Chinese people are collapsing, and with it, one of the main problems of aging is coming up, and the aging problem is not fully supported by the state welfare state. Uh, I'd like your views. You would have seen people, and the demographic problem. And what was your impression about the demographic problem, and whatever you felt about it?
Firstly, you don't see as many people on the streets as you see in India, in our cities. They You see houses, you see everything. Demographics is there. You see old people and old people in reasonably good health. I must add. You see middle-aged people. We were there on a weekend also, and we saw lots of families out. They take a lot of care of their children. And although the government has opened up today meaning about 3 years ago, there's no restriction on the number of children, but nobody wants to have children. There are more dating apps in China than matrimonial apps, and that shows you something. That indicates something. They don't want the responsibility of a family because they are already taking care of their parents. There's a very strong bond. Family bonds are exceedingly strong, which is a good thing about China. And this is something that the rest of the world can emulate. Their families live together or they live in the same apartment block. Our guide was telling us that when she goes to work, her parents take her child. I mean, the child is grown up now. Used to drop her off to school and pick the child up during the lunch break, bring her home, feed the child, give her daughter lunch and a little siesta, and then take her back to school. Because they typically they have a 2 3 hour break in school, and the children are put through this. It's tough. Schooling is tough. And a word about the schooling. You see, I must tell you that in China there is a very strong, good educational system. The educational system is okay. There is something called a pre-primary school, which is not government recognized, and people send their children to that school. It's like over here we have the nursery and pre-nursery. But what is important in China is that the primary and middle school is compulsory. It's government run and compulsory, and every little colony has a school over there. That is around, primary is say 6 to 12, and then you have high school, which is about 12 to 15, and then there's this senior school, that is say your 10th, 11th, 12th. Not everybody gets into the senior school. It's not compulsory. So a number of people, but primary and middle school are compulsory. So a number of people drop out at the middle school and they join the workforce. They go into various skillings and everything else. Now, after schooling, they have a brutally tough entrance exam called a Gauko. It prepares them for the university, and there is a absolute challenge to get in there. It's pure merit-based society. There's no reservations, no nothing. People who don't clear the exam go in and pick up specialized and technical skills, a good vocational track. But people who get into through the Gauco system, admission is so competitive, and college is 4 years. They are focusing on STEM subjects. They are focusing very strongly on STEM subjects, and I think this is their forte. It will stand them in good stead in times to come.
Yeah, but while you said that, you also said that there are more dating apps than marriage. And
Yes,
yeah, you're laughing also. And that means people. And you also said that they don't want to have the responsibility of children, right?
yes,
Right. And if this is so, and then marriage apps, more dating apps than marriage apps. So you're talking of a population who, and you said they have strong family bonds. So these
yes.
are contradictions. So you have a family bond, you have a people who have strong family bonds, but you also have a people who don't want to take it forward. How do you explain this? And
Gen Z,
I mean,
Gen
let
Z.
me explain, expand this
Okay.
question, because I'm not looking at a straightforward answer. I want an intellectual answer from you. When this kind of a thing happens, there are going to be issues in the society. There are going to be societal problems, right? Uh, you have a vanishing bottom layer. and the people who are not prepared to take up that responsibility. How do you explain this dichotomy between a strong family bond and people who don't want to take up the responsibilities of a family?
Okay, it's like this. This I'm talking about the Gen Z, the younger generation who are in the dating age, who are getting into jobs. They are family oriented. Family oriented means they are oriented towards the parents, towards the grandparents, towards the uncles, aunt, one odd uncle, one odd aunt whom they have. I've seen these families out at these various tourist spots like the Great Wall or in the Tiananmen Square and in the Forbidden City. But taking on while they will continue to take on responsibility for their parents in their old age and their grandparents as they're getting older, they are probably shying away from producing children. They may get into their live-in relationships, all that. It's a pretty open society, unlike what we think. The thing about China is you don't criticize the government. You criticize local government. You say this is not working properly or that is not working properly. There are their websites. You go and lodge a complaint. Complaint is registered as we do in our country, and it is acted upon. But in China, that is what when they say that we are a democracy with Chinese characteristics, one should try and discern the meaning. If you have political ambitions, you join the party. You climb up the ladder. You and then it sees whom you hitch your bandwagon onto. If you hitched onto the right guy, you move up. Otherwise, you out. That is separate. Most people who are not interested in political ambitions, as long as you're not criticizing the government, as long as you're not expressing dissent, you're okay. As you know, where China has complete control of social media. Only Chinese apps work. WhatsApp does not work on Wi-Fi in your hotel. My WhatsApp was working because I had taken a international roaming. So it was on mobile data that my WhatsApp was working. Otherwise, and it's only available to foreigners who are using it to communicate with each other or something. The local Chinese citizen has no access to WhatsApp. They have Chinese um, apps over there, and the social media is very strong, very vibrant. The Chinese media is also very strong. Although information is controlled, there's so many. When I could flip the channels in the hotel room, I could see many news channels in Chinese. And there are many channels covering entertainment, covering sports. You see what they do, they highlight, they bring out all the good news and they downplay if there's a scandal or there's some dissent, that is downplayed. They consistently portray the government and leaders in a positive light in the news. But let me tell you, the news channels that I surfed or the cities that I went through, I have not come across a single hoarding or poster of Xi Jinping or the Communist Party. There are no
Right.
flexi boards, there are no posters.
Oh, fine, sir.
So
Actually, uh, let me put it. You started out by saying this is a capitalist state with state control and it's no more a communist state. But yet
yes,
now you're describing the characteristics of a communist state.
I won't call
The
it.
fact, wait, sir,
Just a
let me
moment. A
let me
moment. Okay, okay. Please go ahead.
let me because you see, if you look at the classic communist system, the communist system never, whether it's in USA or not in USA, whether it's in USSR or in Cuba or in Vietnam or anywhere else, it never thrived on shutting off communications between people. It thrived on controlling communications, restricting communications, showing things what they did in good light and downplaying all their bad things. This is how a communist state thrives. Attend to local problems through the Communist Party And that's how they reach out to the people. And don't allow the macro problems. I mean, it's all a capture of power. See, the communist state promises good things for the people. The communist ideology is everyone is equal, and you get the best of everything. And if you go back to the thing, power to the proletariat. That's the line which it started with Karl Marx, and the same thing I think China is continuing. And I'm picking it up from what you have said.
Okay, so it's not only with the communist state. I've traveled extensively to Thailand and Singapore. Thailand and Singapore again has similar controls. So you can't look at only communism as controlling it. Communism, yes, is very much there. It's a part of their lives. And it is basically the communism has expressed itself unlike in Cuba or anywhere else, in a welfare capital, yet capitalist model. I am reminded of the Scandinavian welfare states when I see this. And China has managed to push back poverty.
Yeah.
China has managed to do a lot for its people, and let me tell you, people
No,
today
I have
still
no. So,
still
let
praised Deng Xiaoping and Hu Jintao. I could hear they were talking. I mean, with the guides, etc. They said Deng was the man who said it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. He says when China opened up, he says we also started getting. He says otherwise times were very very difficult.
fine.
They don't want to talk about it, but they say it was a very difficult time.
So,
So
well,
you have control. There is no doubt about it. There is control, but it is not a kind of control that pushes you down and you're afraid to look over your shoulder. It is not that
oh,
kind of control.
well, so
Yes,
yeah, yeah. Look, what you have actually said is it conforms to the typical communist way of functioning. I mean, you look at it. Even a state like Kerala is communist in nature. And West Bengal was also, at one point of time, for over 2 decades, it was under the grip of communism, and we've had communists, part of our government also. So what you're actually describing confirms to the communist principle. That's the point I'm trying to make. That state control is all prevalent. You can't criticize them, and any criticism is countered by what they achieve, and it is also propagated by what they achieve, and what they don't achieve is downplayed. While that is true of every government, look, even our government does that in India. Every government does that, sir. Whether it's in democracy or thing, you see that in a open capitalistic society like USA, where Trump is highlighting what he does and what everyone else has done is useless, and he doesn't counter what thing he's doing. But the fact that the difference is that in other places you can criticize the government, and here you don't, you can't.
may I add another interesting
Yeah,
snippet?
yeah, yeah.
When you enter Tiananmen Square, you're very clearly told beforehand, don't bring in a pencil or a pen. Fine, no sharp objects you can understand, no this thing you can understand. But no pencil or pen is because they are concerned that somebody may deface a wall or somebody may deface a memorial or somebody may write something on the floor. So there is that kind of control. But fine, you go about it. And the other aspect, this is the only country, and I've traveled to so many countries, that your passport has to be on you 24/7. You travel with your passport with you. Otherwise, I would normally leave my passports in the hotel safe and travel with a photocopy of the passport page and my visa page. But here I was carrying my passports. All of us were carrying a passport slip. Chinese citizens have an identity card, much like an Aadhaar card. You can't enter these places unless your card is scanned. It, every road you see, you look up, there are cameras, there are at least a cluster of 10 to 12 cameras facing in every direction. You know that we've discussed this about the facial recognition software. At any moment in time, the state knows where you are and what you're doing. Till you enter your home, it knows you've entered the four walls of your house. or you've entered your classroom. Even I'm sure in the classroom there are cameras, but you're surveilled. You're surveilled, and you get used to that. You live with that. You enjoy yourself within the boundaries set by the state. And the boundaries set by the state, again, I reiterate, are very simple. Do not misbehave. You don't find cases of drunkenness. You don't find homeless. When I asked them, and we have traveled in the bullet train from Beijing to Xi'an and again from Xi'an to Shanghai, there are no shanty towns. Zero. When I asked the guide, I said, what about the homeless? She seemed genuinely surprised. She said that no, homeless government puts them up in shelters. I said, what about some poor people who are unable? She said the government gives them food and puts them up in shelters. So the basic needs of a person is taken care of by the government. And if you're an entrepreneur, you go ahead and you get rich within the bounds of your society, within the bounds of the economic rules that the government has set. You pay your taxes.
Yeah. Okay. I go with whatever you said so far because, and I might add, right? Would like, and I'm sure you also would understand that you've gone to the best parts of China, and you've been exposed to a China which is, made to order for people who go, and probably the tourist guide also has been. She's seen enough tourists to put across a party point of view. Do you think that you came back with an impression of China better than what you went in about your concept of China and this thing?
Okay, firstly, I we did not go exactly as per where the guide took us, and we didn't have the guide right through. The guide was with us
I mean,
only during
let me put it
the
here. I
tour.
mean, you went through the best part of China.
We went through three cities. We've traveled within the city
That's the best part.
by
That's a tourist.
ourselves. No, no, not just tourist part. Sorry, we've gone into inside the city using metros, both in Shanghai and in Beijing. In Xi'an, we didn't use the metro,
Well,
but we
I'm not
have
saying
gone
that. No, no, no,
to.
no. The point I'm trying to make is you went to the best part of China.
Well, I do not know. I hope I can very well believe that even rural China may not be so glitzy, but surely rural China is not does not reflect poverty as we see in our country. I'll
Okay.
put it that way. My impressions of China certainly changed. It has been an eye opener. I admit it completely. I expected far more a stricter kind of a thing, a vigil. I expected that maybe our rooms would be bugged, or maybe, you know, we'd be followed to see where we're going. But it was nothing of the sort because
Yeah, but then you
my
don't know, no? I
no,
mean,
my wife and I no, suddenly decided to take a metro and go somewhere.
then I sir. I mean, let me put it. I mean, I'll contend with this conclusion of yours because you don't
Okay.
know whether you're bugged or you don't know whether you're surveilled because you're always under surveillance. They know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, when I step out of the hotel, there's a camera.
Yeah,
So
you're also
what's
where
the no?
you
Yeah,
and where
so
like in your own thing, see the point is
so
you're actually bringing out. So you're bringing out actually by what you're saying, you're bringing out reinforcing what
no,
this.
so the point is, as I've told you, I am following the laws of the land.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am
yeah.
not
I'm not. So
meeting
I'm not
dissidents
trying.
or anybody else. I have no agenda. I go there as a traveler just to absorb what I can of the culture, of
Look,
the people,
what
of
I'm
its
trying to
history,
no, sir. What I'm trying to
of
say
its
is,
daily life.
what I'm saying is, to presume that you are not bugged or surveilled is probably incorrect, right? Because you don't know, because you're constantly under surveillance there.
I'm telling you,
And if you
everybody
are
is
under
surveilled.
surveillance,
There are cameras everywhere, and their
so
cameras work. We also have street cameras.
no,
They
no,
don't
no,
work.
sir. No, no, I am not saying no to that.
Okay.
Please understand what I'm trying to put across. You have gone through an experience. Would it be
Yes.
fair to say? I mean, would it be fair? Would it be correct to say that you are not bugged or not stopped from going wherever you want? Probably you were not stopped from going wherever you wanted because you didn't. cross a red line.
Yes, yes, that's right.
So we
Now
don't know. So no, we
supposing,
don't. You're under
yeah,
constant surveillance. Yeah, you're under constant
okay,
surveillance is a issue by itself, right? And a state which keeps everyone under its constant surveillance, is got issues. So we'll leave it at that. Actually, you've
all
proven the
right,
point.
all right. What I would put is this: uh, if I had an agenda, if any tourist had an agenda and come in there, A, I don't think they would have got the visa in the first place. B is even if they got the visa,
So I
if
don't
they went
know.
to
I
try,
wouldn't. Okay, fine. That's your experience, and that's why I
yeah,
said your impression is that, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Then the other day, you did mention when we were discussing this aspect of Nijuan involution, right? And you also mentioned at the beginning that the crowds in the malls were much lesser than the crowds you see outside, right?
yes.
And how do you? And for those of you who have not seen my earlier videos on Nijuan, Nijuan is involution, a lot of competition. As a result of competition, there is a lack of consumption. So there is overproduction and lack of consumption, and hence the rates are going down, and there's deflation and all that. So you saw all that. What are your impressions of what I keep discussing and what you experienced?
All right, there are say 100 EV manufacturers all trying. At best, 10 will survive. The rest will go. There is tremendous production. You see cars all over the place in huge parking lots. But again, China relies a lot on export. They do not rely because, again, to use your argument, and it's a fact that if a family has everything, all right, they may want to update something. But beyond that, if the families are lesser and lesser, if the population is declining, there is no domestic demand. I've seen the malls. I started by saying I've seen the malls in Singapore, in Bangkok, all very recently, and in China, in three cities. And certainly the crowds in Bangkok are tremendous. Next would come Singapore, and third would come China. They are looking for sales. You could see many shops are waiting for customers, and that says the Nijuan is happening. It is happening. How they arrest it, we also discuss. China will open up for foreign workers, the way Dubai is, the way the other Gulf states are, the way Singapore is. Guest workers will be welcome. The biggest problem in China is the language ultimately. You're using an app all the time to converse. They are very good at it. You also get very good at it. You're conversing with them on the app, you're speaking in English, and it's being relayed in Chinese, in Mandarin to the person. And she or he is replying in Mandarin, and you're getting to know in English. And good old sign language, of course, works. So, English has been made compulsory in high school and college. But the problem is, and they know it is an international language. English is not the language of Americans or Englishmen. It is an international language of commerce today. It's an international language. It's the only language of aviation. Aviation does not recognize any other language other than English. Shipping. So they know it's a language of commerce. They're doing it. They're trying to introduce. But the problem is, it's like you and me learning Sanskrit in school, but we're not conversing in Sanskrit. We may pass the examination. You see, unless you are conversing regularly in it, your English standards cannot go up. So, looking at things in a positive manner, if they're getting guest speakers, now they've opened up H1B visa scheme for Indians. So, if they get guest workers who are residing there, Shanghai alone, what we came to know was had 150,000 guest workers living there, working there, cycling between place A and place B, driving the cars. and everything, and leading a life like any other citizen. And if you get to know the basic Chinese and able to converse, it's a great place to live in, except that you don't get involved in politics at all.
Yeah,
Don't even
I,
think about
I
it.
I agree with you, sir. I mean, let me also clarify, and this has come from very authenticated sources, that though they're opening up their visa system and all that, the K visa which they've opened up and they've given it,
Yes,
especially for Indians, there's a backlash there. And the backlash is when there are so many graduates here and there are 25% of graduates on getting unemployed, right? In tech jobs, why are you getting Indians? That's a local backlash, right? And the second point of this backlash, the thing is that, you know, in China, jobs don't pay you that much as they pay you, as they are paid even in Europe or you thing.
yes,
It's not a well-paid job; it's a low-paid job because at the end, where China, this is fact. The fact is that the salaries in China are going down, and jobs are scarce because it's all manufacturing economy. So
yes.
right, and 1,50,000 in China, people from India going there is hardly anything. They
No,
would
no,
be
not Indians, not Indians. One
all
lakh
over.
50,000 expats living in Shanghai.
Yeah, one lakh fifty
So
thousand, sir, is
okay,
peanuts.
it's nothing. No,
It's
we're looking
peanuts.
into the future when we're saying how
Yeah,
China addresses its demographic problems.
yeah.
This is one way, perhaps. But the
No,
point
no,
that
that
you made a very significant point. China's strength is manufacturing.
yeah,
Manufacturing needs demand. Manufacturing cannot just go to a
yeah,
warehouse.
yeah,
It needs demand from the warehouse. It has to go to the retailer. It
yeah.
has to go to the consumer. Now, if that chain is blocked, and with Trump's tariffs on one side, the US was one of the biggest markets of China. And domestic consumption on the low, where does that manufacturing go?
Yeah, that's what
Today,
actually.
today your viewers must know, and I'm sure many of them know, that China works on a two-shift system, 9 to 9, 6 days a week, with a break of only half an hour, half an hour, half an hour. You get three breaks during the day, 1.5 hours. So, in effect, a person is putting 10.5 hours worker. And during 10.5 hours that he's working, there's no mobile phone on the factory floor. So, when you're producing and 9 to 9 from 9 to 9 in the morning, when you're at this huge capacity, you're manufacturing. How are you going to? You have to slow down your manufacturing. Now, slowing down manufacturing, how it will affect China, the economists and others would already tell you, and as a common man, I can tell you it will slow down the economy in a not a
Right.
very good fashion.
Thank you, sir. I think you hit the nail on the head in the end. You know, you you hit the nail on the head, in end. Look, folks, for those of you who see, uh, let me analyze what he said and what we have been discussing. China has a problem of consumption that comes out very clearly the fact that their malls are not fully subscribed to. People are not this thing. And the fact that they're overproducing and they're not consuming enough is a issue. And that's a very great limiting factor in the Chinese economy as a whole because every big economy cannot go beyond a point unless it consumes on its own. And that unfortunately is decreasing in China, right? At this point of time because of our production XYZ. In future, it can't increase because people are not getting married, people are not going to produce, the population is going to decline. So we're going to see a limit to what China can become. And those of you, I mean, this is my reading. Those of you who believe you know, answers have come, they'll do on AI, AAO, all that. Take it from me. AI is a bubble about to burst. And this is not my view again. This, of course, was my view, has always been my view, right from the day I started learning AI. But today, Goldman Sachs CEO has come out and said AI is in a bubble zone. People are not sure whether they'll recover the money they've invested into AI. right? It's so those of us who think AI is going to be the ultimate solution to our world's problems, or the ultimate problem to the world's solutions, sorry, AI, if when that bubble bursts, a lot of things are going to fall. And one of the first things which is going to fall is the Chinese society, which is now overtly over dependent on AI and manufacturing. So there might not be a collapse in China, right? The- Because 1 billion people, 1 billion plus people are not going to run away. Chinese society will go through, but there's a limits to where China can head, and this is my prediction, and this is my conviction, and it will not change, right? And I'm sure General Gautam Moorthy will also agree, with in reflection of his trip as days go by, how things are. Because Chinese, in fact, every communist, and this is historic, has a way of projecting itself. A communist society projects itself as the best, and its success lies in the fact it has to convince others it is the best. So that problem is there, and anyone who goes to China will get affected. If I go to China tomorrow, I will also get that blitz in front. But then we'll see how things go. So, you have any other views which you feel after reflection that you think of China in the long term? Before I take a few questions.
See, the China in the long term, you have studied it in far more greater detail than I have, and there are certain metrics which you are following, which tells you that there is a huge demographic fault line which they have come across. They are right now in the transition stage. Whether it will pick up or whether it will fall further, we do not know. Can robots replace workers? If robots have to replace workers, then you're making more unemployment. You're increasing unemployment. You're talking about Chinese are objecting to workers coming across and working there. As long as they keep unemployment down to, in single percentage and less than, 5% or so, then the society will manage because the welfare state can help out. But if unemployment goes up, then they would be facing a serious problem. Lastly, I'd like to speak on your word projection. From what I could see, China is probably projecting in the manner that they do in the media and everywhere else. But if you walk along the cities, you walk to these places, there's no projection. People are just there out enjoying a balmy evening with their families, eating out. You know what people in other places do? There long stretches in various cities which have areas blocked for traffic and they're only citizens. And one point we have not covered is about minorities, which I would like to mention. China has a lot of minorities. We have visited Buddhist temples. We have seen churches there. We have seen mosques. We have, in fact, spent an afternoon in the Muslim quarter in Xi'an. There are women wearing hijabs. They are leading their lives. But when you look at Xinjiang and one knows what is happening in Xinjiang and what is happening here, there is a vast difference. Xinjiang we have obviously not visited, but what one has gleaned is why, I've asked myself this question. I said, here I find the Muslims very open and, enjoying life and doing, selling their products. And it's a very vibrant, happening place. The Muslim quarter of Xi'an is very, very vibrant. It's a lovely place to spend a whole day, actually. And why is it so in Xinjiang? And the reason, the answer is only one. They, the, they felt that the state was being threatened. Separatism, splitism is the word that they use, and terrorism. China will not tolerate any of the three. The citizens of Xi'an are well integrated into Chinese society. They have complete religious freedom to do what they want other than to cherry pick verses and follow a different thing. So obviously Whether it's a priest or whether it's an imam, I'm sure the sermons and the discourses, and even the Buddhist temple, beautiful Buddhist temple we visited, and in Shanghai. So you follow your religion as long as you don't buck the political system, plain and simple. I wanted to bring that out.
That's a thing that, yeah, I have no doubt, sir, that one of the strengths of the Chinese government is their ability to, you know, keep religion out of politics, which has its huge merits.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
its huge merits, of course, in a non-democratic society like China, it's not a democracy by any set of standards. It'll work, but in a democracy, it doesn't work. I mean, that's the way it is. No democracy can survive by keeping politics and religion out. They're intertwined. But then we'll leave it at that. We'll take a few questions if you don't mind, right? And there are some interesting questions. So let's say this, yeah. All said and done, humans are humans. The Chinese are well on the road to replace these humans with robots. Probably the aim is to improve manufacturing efficiency. Your views?
I just spoke about it. I said there has to be a balance. Maybe if the population is declined to such an extent, robots would come in, but you have to view it against unemployment. You cannot afford to have a large unemployed youth. No country can afford it, and least of all a country like China.
Yeah,
So I'm afraid while they'll make major stride in robotics and manufacturing and machine learning and everything else, they will not replace humans with robots. The other aspect that you mentioned about AI, General Shankar, is that this. I think the Chinese have also realized that AI is a useful tool. It is not an end in itself. The people who are making a mistake of using AI as an end in itself, as a be all end all of all problems or everything else, are going hugely wrong. AI will produce what is there already. They will summarize it and put it across to you, what already exists. But AI, to my mind, will not be able to do the kind of thinking that humans do. It will never replace humans.
yeah.
To my mind, that's what I think. And so
No, I
Chinese
agree completely, sir.
reliance on AI is to use it as a strong tool, as an enabler.
But I wouldn't like to I mean, this conclusion which you have drawn, I wouldn't like to agree with it,
Okay.
because this is at two different levels, right? The whole story is being played out at two different levels, and the Chinese government is placing too much thing reliance on AI as a tool by end in itself. I mean, that's
That
what it is. So we'll leave that out. But
okay.
what the fundamental thing which you said is right, because no society can become, can grow beyond a point if it doesn't consume. And China suffers from that, and that is now very clear, right? Yeah, next question, sir. The local governments in China have funds and they spend, unlike in India, where CMs control with MLAs. Your views, sir?
Well, China does have the carrot and stick policy. Let's be very clear about it. And stick is a hard stick. We keep coming across mayor of so and so city has been arrested for corruption, for embezzlement, and then sentenced to death. Now, that is a kind of risk. It's not that there's no corruption in China. There's corruption, but then you're taking a huge risk. The beauty is that local governments work. I am telling you, I have not seen a scrap of paper on the roads, the railway station, or the airports. Not one scrap of paper. People are constantly cleaning the place. Everything is spick and span. I found it. I mean, Singapore, I thought was the cleanest city that I had seen, but the three Chinese cities that I visited, far I mean, beyond Singapore, everything is gleaming, everything is shining, not a
Yeah.
pothole on the road, piped water to every household. And we were discussing with the guide about their housing colonies. So they have their two-bedroom flats, they have their three-bedroom flats. Houses closest to the city are all occupied. As you move away from the city center, there is less and less occupancy. There are far more houses than the people, and that General Shankar has covered numerous podcasts, discussions in his articles also. So there is a Evergrande collapsed. Private companies will collapse. People will get out of jobs. You see, when you're playing the capitalist game, you are taking these risks. And China very well knows they're taking this risk. I will also tell you a little bit about the PLA. This is narrated to me by a friend who was doing a course in Australia. And along with that course, he had gone to China on an official visit. And he told me they were put up in what he considered was not five-star, but a seven-star hotel. And that hotel was a property of the PLA, and the PLA was running the hotel. He told me that. So, of course, we did not stay in any PLA designated hotel, but the army has its interests, commercial interests too. That this is a second-hand information that I'm giving you, but I know that friend of mine, and he would be speaking the truth. And this is about some 20 years ago. So what it is today, how much the PLA is in control, what properties it controls, what activities it controls, we really do not.
Okay.
Back to you, Chandrasekhar.
Thanks a lot, sir. Next question. What lessons are the most important for us to draw from China in order to improve ourselves and achieve progress? Which aspects of China are transposable, reproducible in India, and which are not?
Very, very good question. Most important lesson I learned from China is civic sense. A very high standard of civic sense everybody has, a very high standard of family values. We need to strengthen our family values in our country. We need to have the civic sense in our country. And we need another good thing, good, bad, double-edged sword, you may say. I think the common citizen should stay away from politics. You're called to vote once in 5 years, you vote once in 5 years, fine, you criticize the government where it is going wrong and give your suggestions. The suggestions should be positive, like they have in China. You can most welcome to give your suggestions. There are websites, you go on the government website, you suggest anything that you want. You give positive suggestions. So, civic sense, if you ask me, civic sense is the most important thing to learn, easily implementable in India. Fines for everything, traffic, orderly traffic. And there are certain things, okay, about the metros. There's a very interesting thing that I must tell you, your viewers. You know, we always complain about the last mile connectivity in metros. Now, in China, they have an app which is linked to cycles, bicycles. So you have the app with a barcode, you scan the cycle code, and the lock opens, you open the lock, and you cycle from the metro station to your office, you park the cycle there, you lock the cycle. And somebody else comes and that amount is deducted from your account of use. And somebody else comes and uses that cycle to go back to the metro station, to go back to from metro station to the colony where you live. So there are cycles galore, and almost everyone is cycling over there. The last mile connectivity is sorted out. You keep recharging your app, and you're on the move. This is another thing that we can learn from them. A simple, easy way in our cities to move along.
Yeah, yeah. That smart bike system is there in Chennai.
Yeah. Oh, very good. I'm happy to hear
Oh
this.
yeah, it's there.
I,
It's there.
I, I, I didn't know this.
There's a
Yeah.
smart bike system. It's not as the way you're saying it, but it's there. Point to point, you can take
Okay.
a cycle and go. Right? Yeah. So I will take one more question. If the Yeah, I think this question I'll take. There's an overlapping of communism and capitalism in China, just like there's an overlapping of democracy and autocracy in India and US. Human beings are never black and white. Uh, he's stating the obvious, but I'd like your views on this.
Well, I won't say India is an autocracy. The US certainly is with the presidential powers, but India still has a very robust democratic system. There are more states that are ruled by non BJP parties than by BJP parties. Also, if you look at autocracy, it depends on how a leader conducts itself. One could argue that certain regional leaders are autocrats. One could argue that the prime minister is autocrat. It's up for a discussion. But I don't think there is democracy, and a strong democracy everybody craves for. Uh, but China is showing you how communism and capitalism can coexist. Communism is, I think, only in name as a welfare state to that extent. But they've understood that um, all men are not equal. Some will get richer than the others. Let's face it. Everybody cannot. Gone are the days when they were made to work on collective farms, etc., etc. Because given a free hand, everybody will work according to his ability, according to the opportunities that comes across him, and will create his own furrow.
Yeah. I go with you, sir, but I'd like to highlight one aspect to everyone who's seeing this. Please understand, and this is a macro problem which they've created for themselves, and it's a self-limiting factor of China. It's a major thing one has to understand. If you go back into the history of China, Deng Xiaoping freed China, and China
Yes.
started to grow at astronomical rates. They continued to grow at astronomical rates till 2010. When around 2010-11, they came a state where they had grown so much, the disparity in societies were growing. The communist society, the communist party was under threat. And this is a fact. The communist party was under threat, and when Xi Jinping came, he reversed it back to communism. Okay. I mean, notwithstanding what Gen Gautam Moorthy 13 years later now is gone and seen and what others talk, the fact is a communist state. Because at the top, Xi Jinping reversed it back to communism. He reversed it back to communism, brought communist principles back, brought state control back at macro level. And he let controls loose at the bottom level. At the bottom level, the states continued to function as capitalists. You
Yes.
know, there's a huge dichotomy which they created for themselves. As a result, as a result, the provinces in China functioned as independent capitalist societies. The state at the top started behaving like a typical communist society, and there's a fracture which has taken place. And this fracture is not going to get resolved, and that's going to limit China because one of the biggest problems of consumption, demography, lack of dual circulation, economics, which I call as economics, is because of this fracture, right? It's not a matter of human beings. It's not a matter of anything else. It's a matter of state control, and this is where communism in China rules, right? What all of us see, and like what Then Gautam Murthy he's seen come back, and right, he's drawn that conclusion. Look, it's a capitalist society with state controls. It is not. You look at it deeply, it is a communist society with a capitalist undertone. I'm just flipping it around the other way. And I'm flipping it the other way around. It's a capitalist nation with sorry, it's a communist
The
nation
communist nation or the capitalist.
with a capitalist undertone, underbelly. And it'll not work, right? Especially when people are going down. And their unnatural, you know, stress on STEM. No society will, flourish without the societal inputs of arts, crafts, free thinking. So there's a limiting factors. There are a lot of limiting factors about the society. And if you go back and you transpose whatever is happening in the Chinese system today and compare it with what happened in the various dynasties beyond that, it's actually eerily similar. This is how Chinese society has functioned through ages. And they have gone through fractures and they have gone through a lot of misery because of this. So let's see how things go. Okay. So the last question is from someone whom you are very familiar with, Brigadier Vinayak Ramnarayan.
My question.
Right? Your cosmate. So my personal impression is that in China, all that glitters is not gold. Moreover, they showcase the brighter of side of China through propaganda. So your views. And after this,
Well,
we'll close.
well, as I told you, their tourist sites are fantastic. It is not really propaganda. We also went for a show. They're well-maintained tourist sites, very well maintained with and we there are sound and light shows. There are everything, all kinds of things. There are operas that are being held, which hark back to their history, their culture. They celebrate the culture. They speak about the ills of the what the certain foibles of the emperors and the things that they did. They are very well aware of the history. But if you go around this city, as I said, we may have been surveilled as, or would have been surveilled, meaning you, at any point in time, you could know where someone is. If you're in a metro, you're in a metro. If you're in a shopping street, you're in a shopping street. If you're just walking down, taking a walk around the park, you're taking a walk around the park. So it is, and there are food stalls all over. People are eating out. People are enjoying themselves. That is not propaganda. That you see for yourself. What Shankar said is a very important thing. He says what G has done is to ensure that communist ideals are back at the top, but he has let capitalism flourish at the underlevel. That capitalism flourishing at the underlevel is what a tourist and a traveler sees. The tourist is the traveler is not going so much as a scholar into the systems of China, but going to see as to how what the reflections, what the society reflects. And the society at that level, at the people's level, is representing capitalism and a reasonable openness of society. Why I say reasonable? Because I've traveled extensively in Thailand and, of course, Singapore. There also, you cannot criticize a king. You cannot criticize a king at all in Thailand. You will be jailed. So there are certain limitations. And you understand, and Asians, you see, Asians as a people understand limitations. It is only here, over here, when we have myriads of, you know, clashing cultures and religions and everything else, and people highlighting it, politicians, many self-serving ones using it to get votes, then you see, then society goes wrong. But if, while you say all that glitters is not gold, let me tell you that some of it, they perhaps, as General Shankar said, things may come to an head in the future, but as long as you're able to manage this dichotomy of communist control and capitalism undertones well, then you will continue to manage it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot, sir. I think we had a terrific session. We've had someone from who's gone to China, seen come back, right, and a very open discussion on what China is, right, and I mean, we have to learn, and of course, even from China, there's a lot to learn. I'm glad a question was asked on that, and there is a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from everywhere in the world. It's not as if that society is completely bad. The society could be different. The government is different. When we talk of China, we generally talk of the government. We don't talk of the
Yes.
society,
Society.
right? Okay, the society is different. They're people like any one of us, life and blood. But there are certain things of the Chinese society which I might like to highlight before we think. The Indian society and the Chinese society are completely different. Completely
Yes.
different, right? Because our society changes, and our society or ethnicity or linguistic capability, everything changes with every 20 kilometers. It doesn't do so in China. In China, it's almost monoethnic, at least in the eastern part of China. The western part of China is completely different, right? It has different religions, different people, completely different ethnicity, right? And this eastern part of China, which is the majority, has imposed itself on the others. So you have an attempt to homogenize China, right? And what we are dealing with this is a homogenized China. It is to some extent unnatural, right? Well, having said that, let me take it to a different level of thinking. If you look at the geography of China, okay, Indian rivers flow east west, and so with every river, as you go from south to north, people change. Everything changes because people live along the rivers historically, and cultures develop along rivers. Okay, Indus in one direction, Ganges in one direction, come down Tapti in one direction, Narmada in another direction, Mahanadi in another direction, Kaveri another direction, and our civilization, Indian civilization, has grown along rivers, and these rivers have been flowing apart from each other in different directions, all horizontal, and our societies have grown accordingly, but they've learned to live with each other. Religions have also gone that way. Religions have spread with rivers. Religions always spread with rivers, right? But you look at the Chinese geography. The Chinese geography is east-west rivers, right? Two main rivers, only two, Honghui and Yangtze, Yellow River and Yangtze. And the complete Chinese civilization lives between, the core of the Chinese civilization is between these two rivers. So there is a lot of homogeneity in that and monotheism in that in their society, which, right? So it is like when you compare India and China, it is like comparing apples and oranges. Okay, so while there is a lot to learn from them, there is very little we can imbibe beyond a point. So there's a point which I just thought I'll make because these are facts. These are facts which I'm now taking. I'm now analyzing China beyond the normal, which I have in my mind when I do the normal day-to-day analysis. Okay, you have anything to say on this? So you're welcome, and then we'll close it.
No, I just like to buttress your point to say that China has a number of ethnicities, a number of dialects, but the dialects have all been unified under Mandarin, which is now a common tongue. Cantonese is no
Yeah,
longer spoken, perhaps only restricted to that region. But otherwise, it has been homogenized in a script and in Mandarin. So today, everyone in China converses in Mandarin.
yeah.
And yes, they have, the Han people have established their authority on the land.
Right. So to that extent, there's no comparison, and well, fine. Thanks a lot, sir, for giving an
No
insight into
problem.
China and getting us to think on different lines. And I must thank all the audience also who come up with a lot of questions. Thanks a lot. And how is China ruled only by a single party if so open? Well, I've given you the answer. That's because they're homogenized society, a homogenized society, and this was all done by Mao. And right, it is not a new thing. It's been done long back. And if you go through the problems which the Chinese society had at that point of time, and the kind of extermination of people which Mao unleashed during the Great Famine or the Great Leap Forward, as we call it, or for that matter during the cultural revolution. It's horrific, and that's how all this has been achieved at a great cost. We'll leave it at that with this. Thanks a lot for everyone, sir. Thanks a lot to you, and Jai Hind to everyone, and Jai Hind to you also, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.